So I wanted to get started by talking a little bit about the importance of having multiple offensive threats, which has been the difference between Golden State and Dallas and the difference between Boston and Miami. We looked at this Boston game last night. You go into an important game on the road in game 5, and Jason Tatum plays poorly, right? Marcus Smart plays poorly. You don't shoot the ball particularly well. But that team is loaded with guys that can score. And so, even though those two guys didn't play particularly well, you got a big Derek White game. You got a monster Jaylen Brown game, right? The anatomy of having multiple threats is, chances are, like this is just the anatomy of being a basketball player. Any of you guys who are listening who play pickup, don't you have days where you go up and everything's going in? And then you have days where you're going up, where you're taking the same shots and they just miss for whatever reason, right? Like there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like shot, just like a difference in expected shot result versus actual shot result, right? And if you only have a couple of threats, it's far more likely that you might catch them on a night where no one's scoring. We go forward to Golden State tonight. I've once again met up with Liv Moods, our one of our big gambling people here at the Volume, and we were talking about a same game parlay to put together today. And Klay Thompson uniquely seems to have a nose for these types of settings. He's one of those guys that seems to get even more confident and have even more audacity when the stakes are highest, which is why he's so reliable towards the ends of playoff series. And it's such an interesting dynamic. It's such an interesting dynamic in the sense that threat is always, that's always a possibility when you have that much talent on the floor. If it wasn't Klay tonight, it would have been someone else. Jordan Poole had an okay game, right? I think he had 14 points or 15 points, right? Like that's an okay game from Jordan Poole. You got Steph Curry was largely playing decoy tonight. And the value of having all those threats is what allows you to have enough shots at the roulette table to have a couple of them hit. If I got 6 guys that can go for 20 points, it's a lot more possible that a couple of guys actually do. Andrew Wiggins couldn't buy a 3-point shot tonight, but he was massive scoring in the mid-range and at the rim, right? Like that's a nice threat coming through for you there. Kevon Looney, 18 rebounds. 7 offensive rebounds, 7 additional possessions, including what I thought was the dagger to Klay Thompson on the right wing after an Andrew Wiggins missed 3 on the left wing. And with Kevon Looney, it's not the same kind of threat, right? It's not, him going for 25 points. What it is it's him remaining a threat off the basketball by simply playing hard and having a nose for the ball, chasing after offensive rebounds, right? And securing the defensive rebounds. This is something I've been super critical of a lot of players over the years. I'm going to be critical about with Luka about it later tonight. There are roughly, depending on the team you play, around 100 possessions in a basketball game. You're not going to shoot or pass on all of them. You might be, like, if you're a starter, you're going to be in there for 70-ish possessions. So what are you going to do on the other 30 or 40 possessions when you're not involved, right? That's what Kevon Looney does to remain a threat. But most importantly, and this is, I think, the thing that most frequently gets glossed over with this whole Golden State Warriors system, because don't get me wrong, they have a lot of talent. Golden State and Boston have proven that they have the 2 most talented rosters in this playoff field. Unfortunately, because of the decline of Phoenix's superstars, which we've been over on the show before. But there's something very different about the way Steph plays and the way that opens things up for other scorers. One of the heliocentric style, I think, gets maligned too much. I think people point to heliocentric styles failing when more often than not it is talent. Like everyone says, 2018 Harden, it failed. And don't get me wrong, Harden wasn't great, deserves a ton of criticism there. But they were up 3-2 before Chris Paul went down, right? They look at, things like we look at like the Clippers last year. It's very heliocentric. It's very Reggie Jackson and Paul George just isolating while they space the floor. But it's like, I mean, if they have Kawhi Leonard, they probably beat Phoenix, right? You know? And then this year with Luka, it's like this style, the spreading the floor, it has a lot more effectiveness than you would think. This team has outkicked coverage with respect to the amount of talent that it has. It has a lot more to do with the fact that Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie are running your alternate possession. So to be clear up front, I do think heliocentric basketball can work if you have the right roster construction. But this style that Steph plays with also works, and it's damn effective. It requires a different kind of thing, right? Like there's a huge difference between a spot-up threat and a scoring threat. For heliocentric systems, you need spot-up threats. For movement systems and with a star that can succeed so much off ball like Steph, it helps more to have scoring threats. That's why you saw guys like Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston and Leandro Barbosa and Jordan Poole, these kinds of guys succeeding alongside Steph that have a scoring archetype. Because with the way that Steph inverts a defense, with the way that he can succeed off ball, with the way that he dictates attention even when he doesn't have the ball, a lot more often than not, it has to do with guys being able to put the ball on the floor and score. Rather than with a heliocentric system, you need guys like Maxi Kleber, and you need guys like Reggie Bullock who can just spot up and be deadly when you help, as guys like Luka are driving into the lane. But what's this Steph play style, we've talked about it before, and I said the same thing to Colin Cowherd when I went on his show on Sunday. It's impossible to replicate because there just isn't a player around the league that has the requisite commitment to winning to be willing to do something like be a decoy all night long. Like there was a little flurry there in the third quarter where Steph tried to score, but outside of that, he basically was content to absorb defensive attention and let his teammates go off. That's very unique around the NBA. The Warriors had 36 assists on 45 field goals tonight. That's an insane number. Over 75% of their field goals were assisted tonight. Think about how wild that is. That kind of thing just doesn't happen anywhere else in the league. That is a unique, impossible to replicate play style that is opened up by Steph, and everyone down the line is bought into it, including Klay Thompson, who was incredible tonight. I wanted to talk about this Klay hot streak because the anatomy of a Klay hot streak is so different than other scores. You know, a lot of Warriors fans over the course of the years will tell you that Steph is obviously a much better player than Klay, and obviously Steph is a much better shooter than Klay. Steph's the best shooter of all time. But Warriors fans usually will admit that Klay's hot streaks are actually better than Steph's. He famously once scored, 37 points in a quarter? He once had 60 points in 3 quarters. Klay Thompson would be and it's a couple of different things. One, he's got a really quick release. And there's not a lot of wasted movement. It's one of the number one things that I coach kids on when I'm coaching my high school kids about shooting. You know, the more moving parts you have, the more margin for error there is, or the less margin for error there is. If I'm doing all sorts of weird stuff as I'm going up into my shot, all it takes is one of those parts getting out of whack for the shot to miss. Klay Thompson is one of my favorite players to show people as an example of beautiful shooting form because there is no wasted motion, which is one of the main things that allows him to get that muscle memory so dialed in that he can hit these hot streaks. And then the key is he's tall. He's 6'7". And with that quick release at 6'7", for Klay, if he wants to, he doesn't have to work too hard to get a shot off. And so his hot streaks have always been so interesting to me because it's a different kind of helplessness than it is with Steph. A lot of times with Steph, you feel like you're guarding him well, and he's just making impossible shots because he's the best shooter of all time. With Klay, it just feels like he's getting great looks. He seems to have a nose for the ball. This is another huge detail. This is an instinct thing. It's not something you can coach. It's something that some players just have. It's like It's like the rebounders, like Kevon Looney, who just have an instinctual nose for the basketball. They seem to know where the ball's coming off the rim. They seem to know where they're supposed to be to get the rebound. Klay's the same way with his spotting up. His ability to relocate and kind of just have a feeling of where he can get the basketball and kind of just have a feeling of where the open spot in the defense is. Every time there's an offensive rebound, doesn't it just kind of seem like Klay's open? He'll sense that sort of thing. He'll sense when the offensive rebound is there and he won't get back on defense. He'll relocate. He's got all these little unique traits that are so different from other shooters around the league. And I think that's why, even though he's not as good a shooter as Steph, he can have hot streaks that are even crazier. But overall, I thought tonight was an absolute clinic in what makes this Golden State offense great.